I'd like to start off with a few questions, just to get a bit of a sense of the audience. Who of you has ever gone for a walk in the hills? Can you just raise your hand? All right, that's pretty good. Who of you has ever climbed an actual mountain? You raise your hands? Okay, a bit less, but still good. Who of you has ever climbed a mountain higher than 8,000 meters? Interesting. Right, let's do a little exercise to get everybody in the mood for my talk. I want you to all close your eyes. Close your eyes and imagine you're on the summit of Mount Everest. You're enjoying the spectacular view. You're looking down on snowy giants in all directions. You can see the clouds, not high above you, but way below you. Can you see it? Now add to that the cold. It's minus 20 degrees centigrade. You're exhausted because you've been climbing non-stop all night long. And you know that every step you take can be your last one. Can you feel it? Now add to that the euphoria, the feeling of accomplishment of being on top of the world. The theme today is moonshots, and you can't come closer to the moon without leaving Earth than by standing on the top of Mount Everest. My name is Wim Smets, and I love challenges. Professionally, I shoot for the moon as a digital transformation manager. And when I'm not working, I find my challenges at extreme altitude. Since 2006, I've been climbing 8,000 meter peaks. I've undertaken 7 expeditions since then. And it's with great pride that I can tell you that I've reached the summit 5 times. And with that, hold a Belgian record. But it's with even greater pride that I can tell you that I've survived 7 times. Expeditions at 8,000 meters have shaped me into who I am today, not just as a mountaineer, but also as a manager and as a person. Shooting for the moon at extreme altitude has changed the way I work, the way I interact with people, the way I see myself. Now, I firmly believe that everyone should have his or her moonshot. For some of you, it may be running a marathon. For others, it may be starting up your own business. For me, it's climbing 8,000 meter peaks. And there's obviously a lot of differences between these different types of moonshots. But there are also a number of things that work for every moonshot. So today, I want to share a few tips with you that have allowed me to successfully shoot for the moon by climbing high. And the great thing about these tips is that to execute them, all you need is you. So, tip number 1. A long time ago, I actually started hiking. And it's not until I'd done that for a few years that I went to Ecuador to climb my first big peaks. Now, when I went to Ecuador, I had never used crampons, axes, ropes before, and I didn't know all that much about extreme altitude. In other words, I lacked pretty much every possible skill that was required to pull this off. And I remember walking out of the warm mountain lodge into the cold of the night, looking up to this icy giant and thinking, oh boy. And a few hours later, I was struggling up this 60-degree ice slope, holding onto my ice axes for dear life, asking myself, what the hell was I thinking when I decided to do this? But despite the struggle, I made it to the summit. And I decided that if I wanted to get better at mountaineering, I needed to do more of it, not less. So I followed my passion, and I increased my mountaineering skills one step at a time. Took a course, read a few books, but most of my learning I did through exploring. I did not become a better mountaineer by enjoying my strengths. I did it by exploring my weaknesses, by finding bigger and harder mountaineering moonshots to overcome. But you can't do that within your comfort zone. You need to get out of your comfort zone to turn your weaknesses into strengths. If I'd stayed in my comfort zone, I would still be hiking, and I never would have felt the euphoria of being on top of the world. So if you want to shoot for the moon, learn. Learn by exploring your weaknesses. Eagerness to learn makes the unknown look like an opportunity instead of a threat. Threats hold you back, but it's opportunities that push you forward. Tip number 2. In 2005, I went climbing in Antarctica. Now, if you thought minus 20 degrees is pretty cold, think again. Minus 50 is not exceptional in Antarctica in the summer. So I was climbing from the low camp to the high camp, and I was wearing gloves. And at a certain point, I decided, these gloves, it's too cold for gloves. I need to put on my super warm mitts. Now, I had foreseen this possibility in the morning before I got going. So instead of putting my mitts in my backpack, I'd hooked them up to my harness. So it was very easy for me to take off gloves, switch them for mitts, without stopping and taking off my backpack. However, mitts do not produce warmth. They just retain the warmth that you put in them. So for the first 10 minutes, after I put my hands in cold mitts, these mitts sucked all the warmth out of my fingers. And I was in absolute agony. So as of then, I made it a daily habit to warm up my mitts before I use them, and I don't switch anymore from gloves to mitts. When you get out of your comfort zone, you're more likely to make mistakes. But making mistakes does not have to be a bad thing, because mistakes provide the most intense learning experiences. However, to learn from mistakes, there are 3 steps you need to take. The first step is you need to make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you can't really learn from them. Obvious, right? So I nearly froze my fingers off. Mistake made, tick in the box. The second step is you have to admit your mistake. And that's probably the hardest step. It is so easy to blame circumstances I can't control for what went wrong. But blaming something I can't control does not make me a better mountaineer. Analyzing what I could have done better in those circumstances does. So I realized that my fingers didn't nearly freeze off because it was cold. No, my fingers nearly froze off because I decided to put my hand in cold mitts. Now, once you've admitted your mistake, it's time for the third step. And that step is do something else next time. Improve. If you keep repeating the same mistake, you're not really learning much. So after I nearly froze my fingers off, I made it a habit to put my mitts in the bottom of my sleeping bag before I went to sleep. The next morning when I pull them out, my mitts, they smell, but my hands stay warm. So if you want to shoot for the moon, make mistakes, admit your mistake, and improve next time. Tip number 3. In 2007, I spent 2 months on Mount Everest. And after 1 month of acclimatizing and fixing ropes and setting up camps, I was ready to go for the summit. However, the weather did not agree with my climbing strategy. Hard winds kept me in base camp for another 2 weeks. Now, it would have been very easy to just sit in base camp, read a book, listen to some music, relax. I did all of that. But I also decided to work hard every day to get myself better prepared for the summit push. So one day I would go for a walk in the neighborhood of base camp, just a couple of 100 meters up, just to get myself a little bit more acclimatized for the summit push. The next day, I would practice climbing techniques over and over again. Now, neither of these things makes a huge difference. As a matter of fact, they may only prepare me 0.1% more for the summit. And 0.1% is not a lot. But if you do it 10 times, you're 1% better prepared for the summit. And 1% may just give you the edge you need to win. You see, big challenges require a solid strategy. But even the best strategy does not execute itself. If I sit in base camp with my strategy, I'm not going to the summit. At some point, I need to get out of my tent, put on my boots, and plow through the snow. There is no alternative for hard work. I wish there was, but there really isn't. And there's obviously always going to be setbacks and problems on the way. Some of these things you can control, others you just have to accept humbly. Bad weather can seriously disrupt my climbing strategy, and even the best mountaineer cannot change the weather above Everest. As a matter of fact, the best thing you can do when it snows is let it snow. But that's obviously not the only thing you need to do. You see, Everest is almost 9 kilometers high. But Everest is not climbed by the kilometer. It is not climbed with big leaps forward. Everest is climbed step by step, inch by inch. And it's the 3 steps right in front of you where you will succeed or fail. It's the hard work you're willing to invest in 0.1% progress that determine whether you win or lose. So if you want to shoot for the moon, accept the things you can't change, like the weather, and focus your hard work on the things you can change, like the next 3 steps. Tip number 4. In 2012, I was getting ready for another day of climbing on Manaslu. I had just spent the night in Camp 1, and the goal of that day was to reach Camp 2. As I was putting on my clothes, the expedition leader called me via the radio and said, "Hey Wim, we'd like you to stay put for a while because there has been an incident higher up the mountain." As the sun rose, the size of this tragic incident became clear. An avalanche had come down and wiped away Camp 3, killed 12 mountaineers and injured many others. Some of these mountaineers had even set up their tents in the middle of the avalanche zone. Mountaineering is a risky business. On every 8,000er that I've been on, people have died. Not necessarily my team, but while I was there on that mountain, people have died. So all the time, you need to be aware of the dangers around you. Now, the good news is that you can minimize this risk. But minimizing risk requires being proactive. If you're looking at an avalanche coming your way, it's probably too late to ask yourself the question, I wonder whether this is an avalanche zone. When rocks are coming your way, it's too late to ask yourself, where did I put my helmet? You see, it's not the biggest risk takers that are the most successful. As a matter of fact, in mountaineering, it's usually the other way around. Mountaineers that take the biggest risks don't live long enough to be very successful. I'm a very conservative mountaineer myself. I have refused to go on a summit attempt more often than I've actually been on the summit of an 8,000er. Yet, 5 times out of 7, I've reached the summit. And that's a pretty good track record. And to me, that just shows that there is no link between taking lots of risks and being successful. But I do believe there is a clear link between taking the right risks and being successful. Because if you're not willing to take any risks at all, you will forgo all the opportunities in life. I have survived 7 expeditions because I'm really good at minimizing risks. But I summited 5 times because I was willing to take risks. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And with living on the edge, I do not mean that a moonshot is only worth it if it was dangerous, or you got injured, or you lost a lot of money. No, I mean that if you only climb mountains of which you know that you will reach the summit, you're not ambitious enough. You're not pushing yourself hard enough. On the other hand, if you do climb mountains of which you do not know for sure that you can actually pull this off, then you'll have to accept that once in a while, you do not reach the summit. If you want to win, you have to be willing to lose. So if you want to shoot for the moon, don't take lots of risks, but take the right risks. So as a conclusion, learn. Don't fear the unknown, but train your eagerness to learn by exploring your weaknesses. Fail. Make mistakes, admit mistakes, and improve next time. Work hard. Accept the things you can change, and focus your hard work in small steps on the things you can change. And deal with risks. Avoid risks, but live on the edge. Because without risks, there are no opportunities. And let me close down with one more tip. And this may actually be the most important one, because it allows you to practice the 4 previous tips. It allows you to take control of your destiny. And the tip is actually pretty simple. Climb your Everest. And I don't mean literally climb Mount Everest. No, I mean climb your Everest. Find that moonshot that makes you tick, that brings out the best in you. Believe in yourself and throw yourself at your Everest with all of your heart. And don't let anybody ever tell you that your Everest was not high enough. Mountaineering is not about how high you've gone, it's about how hard you fought to get there. Mountaineering is not about being on the summit, it's about the journey to the summit. And remember, the only way is up. Thank you very much.